Hey guys, if you would like to watch a video of wives getting caught cheating on camera, go to the YouTube link in description. Viewer discretion advised.
I cheated, which caused my husband to commit suicide mere days after confronting me. The cost of my infidelity. At the suggestion of my therapist, I've decided to write out and share what has transpired in my life over the last year. To get this to make any coherent sense took lots of edits and couple of rewrites. I used to be a fairly talented writer, but I fell out of practice years ago. This forum was recommended to me by a friend as a method of confession, penance, and a warning to share with others. I did something truly horrible for which the consequences were beyond even the worst thing I could have ever imagined. I am sharing this with the full knowledge many will despise me for what I did and the events that took place because of my betrayal. Reading my own words is revolting because I know in a very real sense what I did is unforgivable. I understand far too well how needlessly tragic the events that transpired truly were. My hope is simply that my story can be shared with anyone, in any relationship, and perhaps some future betrayal won't happen. More specifically, I hope someone who is currently cheating on their significant other or even thinking about it might read this and it makes them pause. Many might think my example of what can go wrong being unfaithful is an extreme rarity that seldom occurs. I've been told by people far more knowledgeable than I am, that my situation is sadly far from unique. But I'm willing to take the hate I will receive by sharing this, if it keeps even one person from breaking the heart of someone they love. I am a 28-year-old female, and I was married to a wonderful man I will call William. 8 months ago, my husband confronted me with proof I had been both emotionally and physically unfaithful. A few days after he confronted me about my infidelity, my husband committed suicide. I realize just typing those words out has caused people I don't even know, to hate me. I couldn't believe I had the capability to do something that evil to harm someone I'd loved since we were children. But I did it. If you'd asked either me or William if either of us would ever be unfaithful, we both would have laughed. But to my own shock and surprise, I allowed myself to lose focus and strayed. I knew it would destroy him if he ever found out. But I took the heart of the man I loved and crushed it so cruelly he couldn't endure the pain of this life anymore. Those of you thinking right now that I don't deserve to be breathing, I agree with you. I agree with you so much I've attempted on 2 occasions to make that a reality. I'm assured there is a reason I'm still here. For the moment I've convinced myself that the longer I live, the more I suffer, and I don't deserve the mercy of a suicide if we're being honest. William and I grew up together. I can remember my very early youth, and at no time in my memory did I not know William. We were in the same Sunday school classes, public school classes, and our families had been friends long before he and I ever came along. He could always make me laugh. Kids can be mean, but William never was. I realized I thought he was cute in 6th grade. It wasn't an official crush until high school. William and I had been our one and only loves from early high school all the way through college together. We were best friends and cherished each other so much. After graduation we took a year to get good stable jobs near our families and decided to get married. We took vacations together, we made love at any moment we got the chance. We were ravenous for each other. The only time sex was at the table was during that time of the month. But we'd make love for hours. Beautiful moments of passion. And I threw it all away for something tawdry, cheap, and worthless. We were planning to have children. We knew their names. We were both virgins. He was my first everything and I was his first everything. Part of me wishes I could say I had a drunken one-night stand, tried to keep that from my husband, but he found out. No. I got emotionally and physically involved with a man who was inferior to my husband in every way, shape, and form. I didn't even consider the possibility that a friendship with another man could lead to an attachment forming. My husband and I had a strong marriage. As foolish as that sounds to say now, we really did. My husband was the epitome of strength, I was the one who was weak. Though before this, I considered myself a strong woman. It's just that no one ever told me that while our relationship was so very strong, no relationship is bulletproof. There is not a day that goes by that I don't wish someone had walked up and shot me the minute before anything I did became secretive. It is an indisputable fact the world would be a far better place with my husband here and alive instead of me. There is no rationalizing away truth like that. I had so many chances to stop it before anything happened, and I had absolutely no reason to allow anything to happen. After a brief and heated conversation, he walked out, and I never spoke to him again. I tried to contact him in any and every way I could think of. My God, I tried to reach out so many times just to let him know that I am truly sorry, just to know I hate what I did. My texts to him never showed anything but an unread status to me. So, I doubt he read any emails or heard any voicemails either. But everyone said I needed to give him space and time to think. 2 nights after William confronted me, at 3:17 a.m. there was a loud knock at the front door. I turned on the lights. I thought at first it might be someone in a drunken stupor wanting to curse me out or worse. Then there was another loud knock, and I threw on a hoodie before heading to the door. When I opened the door to see two policemen, I knew. They could have been there for many things, but I knew in an instant why they were there. Their words telling me that my husband's body had been found due to an apparent suicide destroyed me. I dropped to my knees and wailed a shriek of agony. I tore at my skin and hair as the police tried to calm me down. By the time the EMTs got there, I was sitting on the steps rocking back and forth repeating that I was so sorry. Yeah, there was no way I was making it to the funeral even if William's family had allowed any of my family to attend. I was kept sedated for days. The first thing I wanted to do when I got out was visit William's grave. But nobody knew where his parents had him buried. They had every right, but that cut throatly. And I tried to cut throatly that night when I tried to take my life for the first time. I've now been hospitalized twice for attempted suicide. Not asking for pity, in fact I don't want it. Nothing can take this heartache away, and nothing can even numb it. Part of me wishes I had somehow forced him to see me just for a mere moment to tell him how sorry I am and that I knew our marriage was over. But I didn't get that. No, I didn't deserve it. And I have to face the fact that what I did was in fact so vile that making my husband see me might have forced him to take his life even sooner. Many people have said to me my actions were what led him to take his life. I don't think there is any doubt. Until that horrible day he'd been so unbelievably happy, we both had been. He left no suicide note to verify I was his cause of death. But we had been so happy, we loved spending nearly every moment together. To go from that kind of bliss to that kind of grief in such a short span of time ended him. I ended him. My words, actions and thoughts betrayed us both. Regret doesn't kill you. If it did, I would have died before my husband ever confronted me. When COVID hit, William and I quarantined together. I was fortunate enough to teach for an exclusive private school. The benefactors assured us our salary was paid as long as the need for isolation persisted. William worked from home and made a lot of progress on a project he was placed in charge of. The entire world was worried and afraid. But we had each other, and we so enjoyed making the most of it. Watching movies in bed, feeding each other food, playing like two little kids. I am utterly, truly, completely sorry to those that lost a loved one due to that horrible disease. What the world went through was a literal plague upon humanity that caused so much needless death. But my husband and I got closer in those weeks than we ever had before, and our bond had been strong. We joked about how so many people were hating having to spend time with family or God forbid their wife or husband. We simply couldn't get enough of each other. After the first month we had to agree to limit sex to once a day for about a week. Our only argument the entire quarantine was about having to do laundry just to put clean sheets on the bed yet again. And I cheated on that man, which drove him to exit this life due to my evil actions. A man I had such a close bond with. I was an idiot in so many ways. But for me to think because of that bond, no temptation was enough to get me to stray was idiocy. I hate myself in so many ways for so many reasons. But knowing I had it all is the most difficult pill to swallow. My affair was atypical of most in many ways. Some aspects of the relationship and betrayal were slightly less vile, some were colder and even more evil. The man I had an affair with I will call Paul. I first encountered him in group Zoom meetings during the pandemic. I found him brash and smug with no valid reason to act that way. He was the school's lacrosse coach and I remember in those Zoom meetings being glad that as an English teacher I would have to interact with him very little. The first time we met face to face we shook jobs and had some small talk. There was zero attraction, at least from me toward him. But I didn't sense any lustful attention emanating from him toward me. During that introduction I learned he was engaged, and I told him I was happily married to a man I adored. No sexual tension, nothing even hinting that would ever be a possibility. The school began allowing half the staff in all areas and half the students to attend school for a week while the other half used Zoom. The next week the other half would attend on site and vice versa. That was supposed to assist with social distancing and the students' feelings of isolation. While eating lunch one day before my next class began, I got an email from Paul. He had written out some toasts and jokes for his upcoming wedding and wanted me to edit what he'd written. I was used to being sent writing to edit, so that was nothing I felt important enough to tell William. Coupled with the fact it all pertained to Paul's wedding and I saw no reason to give my husband a boring detail about that day. The email contained a toast to his parents as well as to the parents of the bride. I took what he'd said and added a few phrases to pull at the heartstrings of all who attended. The jokes directed at his brother, the best man, were absolutely hilarious but a little vulgar for my liking at a wedding. I said as much when I sent back his edited speeches. He laughed and said I just don't know his family and that licking busting was a family tradition. That email exchange began several months of corresponding back and forth. But as difficult as it may believe, not until the very end did anything become inappropriate. Not once did anything become flirtatious or sexual. Well, we did talk about sex, but from a purely scientific and psychological point of view. Our sex talks at that point would have made the biggest nymphomania in history drier than the Sahara. There was nothing emotional or physically stimulating to those conversations. And I enjoyed our corresponding due to the fact I was certain there was no temptation on either end. We discussed race, politics, religion, science, sports, all the things people are hesitant to discuss due to differing opinions. Some of the discussions even got heated. I was called a prude more than once due to my opinions about sex. Yes, I proved him wrong. But I wish to God he'd been right. For the longest time all of this took place during work hours. My husband and I had a landline for emergencies. But as soon as we entered the door at home our smartphones were turned off. Paul didn't even have my number to text until I emailed him with a zinger at the end late in the day. He demanded my number to refute what I'd sent. Dozens of other coworkers had my email and I thought nothing of that. I seriously don't think Paul had any interest in pursuing me either, as at the time he was smitten with his fiancée. But about a month before their big day Paul found out his girlfriend had been carrying on an affair with her high school boyfriend for over a year. He was in shock and thoroughly hurt by the whole situation. I unwittingly became his person to vent to. I don't know where in our string of conversations that things crossed a line. But I began to feel truly sorry for Paul. I truly despised his fiancée for what she'd done, and I saw nothing wrong with that. But after a particularly rough night for him he came to school looking frazzled and I could tell he'd been crying. I gave him a hug and talked to him a bit. He asked if I could stay after school to talk. Since I had a couple hours after work each day before William got home, I agreed. In hindsight I realize now what drew me into my conversations with Paul was a different opinion. William and I had discussed most any topic two people could discuss. I knew before his reply what William would say when I asked him a question the vast majority of the time. I guess I wanted a surprise when I talked or verbal conflict. It was stupid, pathetic, and weak. But that is what led to the affair. Things with William were ideal, and we spent every available moment together. I had mentioned a coworker named Paul in passing to William. But as there was truly nothing going on, I didn't expound upon anything and he saw no reason to pry. When Paul started seeing a new woman, I felt no jealousy and honestly only happiness for him. But William had to go out of town to a construction site in Tulsa for 3 weeks. While he was away, we FaceTimed every day and I missed him morning, noon, and night. But with sudden spare time I found myself also texting with Paul just to pass the time. Instead of an occasional hour or two after school, Paul and I often had time to grab a bite to eat and a drink or two before heading to our separate homes. Oddly enough, the thing that led us to become physical was me being a klutz and the school nurse not working that week. I sprained my ankle one day walking up some steps to go get lunch. Since the nurse was not on site, I went to Paul assuming he as a coach had numbing spray or an ace bandage. He was working on my ankle when I happened to notice he had an apparent erection. I was a bit taken aback he was getting aroused in some way, until I realized from his position he could see slightly up my skirt. I have to admit for a moment I found the fact I was turning him on was stimulating in some way. I adjusted myself to see if a slightly better view would get him more worked up. He called me out on it. I laughed and told him he could work out his frustrations with his new girlfriend. Suddenly he kissed me, and I pushed him away. He kissed me again and I didn't. We made out for a few minutes before I realized what I was doing. I hurriedly got out of his classroom and made it down the halls to my classroom. I sat in disbelief of what had just occurred. I didn't plan for it to happen and I was certain Paul didn't either. I didn't know if I should call William and tell him that moment or wait until he got home that night. But when I talked to Paul after classes he apologized, urged me not to bring any conflict into my marriage and remain just friends. I didn't want to give William more to stress about as he was out of town and focused on his job assignment. After talking with William that night about how things were going in Tulsa I decided to wait and tell him when he got home. His company was having some issues with the client having the manpower to keep the project running smoothly. There were things William could not get done due to the delays which meant he had to spend 2 extra weeks in Tulsa. Paul was there for me to discuss what had happened between us. I couldn't tell any of my women friends. I couldn't rely on any family members as they all rightfully loved William to pieces. I guess random strangers on a site like this would have been the best option had I known about it. But the person I was venting to was the very last person I should have been discussing it with. One Friday after work Paul and I went to a new restaurant near the school for dinner. We sat at the bar and had a few drinks as I explained how unsettled I felt knowing I had to tell my husband what had happened. He asked me how I thought William would take the news and I told Paul he might want to call in sick the day after I told William just in case. He asked if I seriously thought William would beat his ass and I told him no. But I knew it would mean the end of Paul and I conversing and messaging, and rightfully so. Paul confessed he didn't think he would have made it through his breakup if it hadn't been for me. I assured him I was glad to be of assistance and didn't regret helping him. When the realization our friendship would end sunk in, I think we were both a little depressed. I drank too much, he drank too much, and I ended up back at Paul's apartment doing a lot more than kissing. As soon as it was over, my conscience kicked in. Yes, it should have kicked in long before. But I knew beyond all shadow of any doubt my marriage was over and done with. William and I both had said society has allowed far too many second chances for people that didn't deserve them. Yes, humans do make mistakes. While we both believed anyone who cheated did deserve a second chance, it could never be with the one they betrayed. Life might give them the opportunity to love someone else again, but any opportunities with the cheated spouse was totally undeserved and detrimental to both parties. Things got very complicated when William arrived home from Tulsa. I happened to be having my period. So, I knew there would be no intimacy between us, thankfully. Not in a million years would I have subjected my husband to any diseases. Regardless of how much I wanted to make love to William one last time, I couldn't allow that to happen. I wrote out a long letter to William confessing what I'd done and planned to give it to him after a face-to-face confession. To this day I don't know what happened for William to discover what was going on. For all I know, he had been monitoring my online conversation with Paul from day one. I never got to ask him how he discovered my betrayal. And the realization he'd learned what I'd done before I had the chance to tell him caused me to fall to my knees and swear I planned to tell him. William didn't believe that, and I wouldn't have either. He had a stack of the texts between Paul and I printed out. Though I didn't deny any of what he accused me of, that honesty came far too late. He packed a few things in a suitcase and left me on a Monday evening. Wednesday night he drove to a shopping center, parked his car, and took his own life. To know I had destroyed our relationship was torture to my soul like I'd never known. To know I'd even robbed him of a chance to find someone else to be happy with ruined me. The realization I didn't just end my relationship with William but every relationship he'd had or would have caused more guilt than I could ever express. I could go into all the things that have happened since William passed away. But a lot of it would be details far too many wouldn't truly care about. Suffice it to say, his family hates me and my family. My family was disgusted by my actions and continues to be to this day. Their love for me didn't die. But their disappointment and shame toward me will never end, and that's how it should be. No, the results were not anything I intended. But when choices are made that cause pain and suffering, we are still guilty for causing that grief. I see a therapist twice a week to try and work through things. I was introduced to someone through my therapist that is genuinely helping me sort through my feelings. Years ago, she intentionally set a small fire to set off alarms to scare her ex-boyfriend and the girl he just started seeing. The fire spread quickly and what had been intended as a joke caused multiple people to lose their lives. She and I have discussed so many things about her story and mine. Things can never be the way they once were, nor should they be. But if I am to keep living, I need a plan to make what is left of my life as meaningful as possible. So that is basically my story. Anyone who wants to post messages of hate for me and tell me what a wretched person I am, go right ahead. I won't be replying to it. But if it helps you get rid of any rage you have, make me your verbal punching bag. Those with specific questions I will answer as best I can, no matter how much some things may hurt to discuss or admit. For those that read this who have been cheated on, yes, many of you may have been intentionally betrayed. But those who had a significant other who was just as perplexed why they cheated as you were, listen to my story. It doesn't make one damn thing I did right, just the opposite. But if it helps you to understand that you did little to nothing to cause the infidelity, so be it. Those unrepentant cheaters, I hope you do read my cautionary tale and know that you have the ability to destroy. You won't just be destroying someone else. You'll be destroying your relationship with many people and a huge part of yourself. I realize I have no room to preach to or judge anyone except myself. I just don't want anyone to find their William and lose them. I don't want anyone to sink to the depths I did or cause the pain and sorrow I did. And most of all, I want all the people who have great relationships to cherish it and never take it for granted. As humans, we are not immune to being able to be swayed under the wrong conditions and series of events. When we love someone, we carry part of their soul around with us. Just one betrayal makes it impossible for that person to hold that piece of you again. I had my husband's heart in my jobs, and I now deserve the fact I will never again hold his heart, nor will he ever again hold me. This life has far too much pain without harming the very ones we love. And love is far too precious to risk on anything. TL/DR, I cheated, which caused my husband to commit suicide mere days after confronting me. This is intended as a final response update. First, someone shared a link to a post asking if William posted it. William didn't have read it that I know of, and considering he's been dead a year, I doubt it was him. That was a sad story as well. I truly hope the op did not take his own life. For those trying to psychoanalyze me to make some sense out of the things I've done, I appreciate the effort even if it was for your own self-interests. None of the many professionals I have seen so far have a good theory as to why I let things happen. I feel like there should be some valid reason why I did what I did too. I just can't come up with one, and it wouldn't be a valid reason to do what I did if I found one. For those that swear this is fake, I can't fathom a reason anyone would post this for a reason other than to warn and perhaps help. It certainly wasn't a karma grab. I've barely responded, so it wasn't for attention. And it certainly wasn't to lift my spirits because I've rightfully been slammed for my betrayal. Admitting to something horrible is not easy. Imagining it never happened doesn't help me. But you all do. I do not keep in contact with Paul and have not heard from him since before William committed suicide. The only things I know about him are second job from people I worked with. I have no interest in being with Paul or having him in my life in any way. So those thinking I planned my vile actions to ride off into the sunset with a first-year lacrosse coach, no. Bless you all. I won't be commenting anymore. But I'll leave the post up as resource in case someone needs it in the future. Bless you all. May you have stellar lives full of happiness, but most of all peace. I have read every comment. A few I have replied to. Others I have just decided to let people express themselves. Your comment, for what it's worth, may have helped me understand a little better why I acted the way I did. An altered perception of reality is the best way I have yet heard it described. But the concept even sounds stupid to me, and I've experienced it. Saying I lost control of my body or my will would not be correct exactly. But I think in some ways I had everything on autopilot. It doesn't make any sense even when I try to explain it. And it certainly isn't in the neighborhood of being a valid excuse. Everyone here asking why is asking something I'd like to know. I get little glimpses of why I might have been thinking what I was thinking. But there has been no epiphany to explain my out-of-character actions. The only reason I know about Paul's attempted move to Canada is through a former co-worker telling me about the school fallout. I hold no hostilities toward him. If he played me like a fiddle, I still allowed it. He certainly wasn't as naive as I was, but I don't think he intended me to react the way I did. And I am essentially trying to start my life over whether I deserve to or not. Any remnants of the past, especially Paul the First, don't want to take with me like luggage from a horrible journey. You propose that I was unknowingly giving off a vibe due to guilt that William picked up on, which made it suspicious. That's an interesting take and as good an explanation as I can come up with. I just never loved Paul, was never in love with Paul or told Paul the First loved him, because I didn't. Because the relationship was platonic so long, it makes me wonder when I began to give off that vibe. I've stated in another comment all of our correspondence was a click away and my husband wanted to see it. I will never know for sure, and at the end of the day it doesn't matter. While William died, I also betrayed my family, his family, the way I was raised. My parents are now perceived as horrible people over something I did. And they did not teach me to be that way. I'm the person people are ashamed to admit they know or can't wait to talk about. That's fine. I deserve all the disgust aimed at me. I just hate what it's done for both families. I hate knowing people will point out the parents of that guy who killed himself. All the punishment should be mine, and I truly wish it was. Anyway, I thank you for your comment. Life will never be close to the same as it was for me, nor should it ever be. But I would try to spare my worst enemy from what I have endured via self-inflicted wounds. This is no way to live, but that was no way for William to die. When I tried to commit suicide, I was sent to the state mental hospital. I was fairly sedated my first few days there. But when I was allowed to be more aware of my surroundings, I learned more about the other patients. Due to overcrowding in jails, the wing I was on also held what they deemed non-violent, minimal-risk felons. I don't want to give specifics about her case since it did make headlines in my area. The events happened when she was a sophomore in college many years ago. The realization of how many lives were lost and the relationships lost due to her act are incredibly sad. And I can't judge her one bit. What I did was worse in many ways, just less loss of life. But part of her attempts to atone for her crimes has been to try and help others. She accepted a plea and will experience freedom again. And agreed. Anyone who would write this for amusement is just wrong on so many levels. It's words that should have never needed to be written. Comment 1. Edit. Sorry for this edit at the beginning of my post, but Op said in her initial post her husband died 8 months ago. Then she made a comment in which she said he had been dead over a year. Then, she edited the original post to include the death at being over a year. Yet she didn't remove the part where he died 8 months ago. This whole post is full of lies. How are you going to forget how long ago your husband died? And it wasn't a mistake because she has used 8 months and over a year more than once. I have no idea if any of this is true, but I know Op is lying. She can't even make up her mind when this alleged tragedy occurred. I made an earlier post that I was going to edit, but it would be too long, so I'm just going to make a shorter post since Op says she is willing to answer questions about her affair and the events surrounding it. I've read through her post again and I'm still not sure it's legit, but for the sake of argument I'll treat it as if the main points are true. Op starts off saying how she and her soul love being in lockdown. So much so they had to set a rule of having sex only once per day. She says this went on for months and her school paid her salary during this time even though she wasn't working. Op mentions Tulsa, so we know she is in the US. Lockdown in the US started anywhere between early April 2020 and May 2020, depending on the state you lived in. So let's assume she and her husband spent 3 months in lockdown and it started in April. That means she started going back part-time in July 2020. The stuff that led to the affair didn't start right away, so let's say it took a month or two to get going. So her emailing AP started in August or perhaps September. I realize this is a guess, but it's as accurate as it can be without further info from Op. Op says the emailing, texting and the emotional affair went on for several months. She says they were only physical once, meaning they had sex once. There was some kissing and other things she gives little detail about. After she kissed AP, she was so overcome with guilt she swore to come clean to her husband as soon as he got back from a business trip. She had no one to talk to about her problems with AP except AP, sigh. So right before So was to return and Op was going to confess about the kiss, she decided to go out for drinks with her AP. Well, you guessed it, instead of stopping with some kissing and probably a few makeout sessions, she goes back to AP's place and has sex with him right before her husband is due home. They both also decide that they don't want to lose their friendship, so they go have sex. For Paul. 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 When capable of a mea culpa. 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 Incapable 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 of a mea culpa. Comment 2. Every action you took was a choice. You intended to cheat as soon as you met the other guy. Didn't want to disturb William with such a minor detail. I think your husband knew right away, because you were so close, and all the little things that were so trifling you decided not to trouble your dear husband, the texting, the emails. He obviously did notice, but didn't want to believe. You twisted your ankle and the school nurse wasn't there, so you had to go to Paul. Please, what are you, 4 years old? You don't know how to treat a sprained ankle? Ace bandage, it's not surgery. You knew what you wanted, you made out with him, then you arranged to hook up an FK under whatever pretends to quell your conscience, a pathetic trope / you are a cliché. At least be honest with yourself, since you clearly couldn't be honest with your now deceased spouse. What you did is despotic. A girl I dated many decades ago had an older sister who was married with 2 small boys, 4 and 3, nice home. She screwed around, he found out, went outside on the side of the house, and that was his end. What a mess. It was gruesome, it left an impression. She played the grieving repentant widow, for about a year, then she felt she needed to press on. Last I saw before I split up with the sister was she was dating the guy she cheated on her husband now with. My question is, you're coming up on a year, is this whole writing confession your big epiphany, your moment to realize that William would want you to go on living because he loves you? He didn't even really know you. I could only imagine he hated you in the end, was so confused and lost realizing the woman he loved, never existed. It must have been jarring. I will say a prayer his soul finds peace. You said people should feel free to insult, curse you, nah, you're pitiful. And if William was the hearted, kind, gentleman you described, and you destroyed him, I wouldn't want to be you on Judgment Day. Comment 3. Up. I believe your story and concept, as I've seen similar wake of destruction too many times. I understand the why you did it, and berating you would just be like water off a duck's back, as it sort of works that way with people who cheat. That's why they can do it. I want to point out where you failed to truly come clean. It's really hard as the anger bleeds through, as I truly feel for your husband. However, I don't think your actions were evil, cruel and telling, yes. Cruel because you had so many breakpoints to stop and confess to your husband. As you know, he was no doubt monitoring and praying for this call. However, in reality this was no different than any other affair. They also at least half cruel and telling. However, the confession is poor and falls short in the area of the actual affair, being rather backjobbed and feigned. First, it's far more vile that you didn't run off with the coach, because if you did, at least you would have done it for something. Doing it for nothing makes it like cruel joke or prank. Sort of walking into a bank, killing a teller and leaving instead of taking the money. A large part of your story seem almost pining over the AP and spouse seems like an afterthought in your story, a thing soon to be discarded. Especially, after the kissing incident, continue on out to dinner with Guy, then a beeline to his apartment. I don't know how anybody could be that reckless. This is not an unforeseen single accident like the girl setting the fire, but actions of setting fire after fire with pauses in between, causing complete foresight into your actions and total malice towards those hurt, consequence of your actions. Engaging your new love in affairs of your marriage, of matters that should remain intimate between mates. In fact, it again shows you picking the AP over your marriage and your spouse. This shows action beyond an affair, building intimacy over your marriage, something most WS still protect from their AP. Furthermore, when feeling the need to confess, you did run straight to your true love, penetration down on your actions, engaging the AP further and throater, using the rationalization your husband was just too busy to disturb him. The part that I find rather fake in the story is none of the many professionals I have seen so far have a good theory as to why I let things happen. That's the biggest load of BS I ever heard. I find it hard to believe that they have never heard of denial, rationalization, and narcissist behavior, as that's all it takes. This just shows you're still in denial over the whole affair. You actions show everything, valuing the thrill of affair with AP you're so in marriage, showing denial and rationalization through the whole affair, and penetration down on same actions after death of your so, in your confession. A remorseful person given the chance would do a 180 and forever lock away those narcissist actions back in the closet, instead of being the exact same person and continuing the behavior. Urged me not to bring any conflict into my marriage and remain just friends. In man/women talk, this means the AP doesn't want the husband to find out before he plowed you, while you know the only right thing was to call and confess to your husband, which might have saved your marriage and your husband's life. That the second your husband truly die and you fully know it was wrong, you wanted it to continue as well, you still truly won't come clean. I didn't want to give William more distress. Do you know how dishonest that was? It's almost like saying or using logic of I didn't want my husband to burn himself so I burned him. But I knew it would mean the end of Paul and I conversing and messaging, and rightfully so. Paul confessed he didn't think he would have made it through his breakup if it hadn't been for me. I assured him I was glad to be of assistance and didn't regret helping him. When the realization our friendship would end sunk in, I think we were both a little depressed. A loving yet unfaithful spouse at this point, the seeing, hearing, or thinking of Paul would make them hurl and run. Paul playing you for a total fool. Oh, I would made it through his breakup without you. After what happened, actually believe that line? That's practically out of Getting Into Married Woman Pants 101. The line usually works on mistreated wives that marriage has been on the rocks for a while, not a in love actually happily married person. You actually still believe that shit? In hindsight, I realize now what drew me into my conversations with Paul. My God, almost every word out of your mouth in this confession contains pining about Paul and his cheap player moves. At the time you wanted him more than your husband or your marriage. Based on your story, it really didn't take Paul much effort, as you were practically on hunt for Paul, starting with your first description of him, almost common in affairs, for a happily married person would just see a person and not size him up as a person. Nowhere in your story have shown an action of love or concern other than words for your husband. It's all actions of concern and love for Paul. Paul. You couldn't tell anyone as a confidant because they would tell you the same thing and think you had literal gone crazy. If this was trial, a judge would throw this confession back in your face, while provide some details of allocution. You failed to show a true accounting of your actions, why it was wrong, why you know it was wrong, why you did it anyway, and remorse for those actions. For instance, the act with Paul's erection, position he could see slightly up my skirt. The fact I was turning him on was stimulating, adjusted myself, for him to get a slightly better view, get him more worked up. While you confess to some detail, whenever you failed to omit how wrong each step was and why you continue on, to actually turning an accident into a sex act, would you expect one of your students to know it was inappropriate behavior? How would you expect a happy married 28-year-old teacher of young minds to act at a school during school hours who actually claims love for husband? Instead of acting like a webcam WH who enjoys seeing men to jerk off to her, except you're willing to do it for free, in fact you would even give up anything or hurt anybody to do it. You are actual seeing real licensed counselors who don't call you out on this bullshit? As seeing this level of betrayal would cause your husband to off himself, not the actual deed. It took a total lack of empathy towards your husband to engage in this action. If you indeed have the intentions claimed in disclosing your story, then you really need to rewrite the story, this time detailing the awful truth of your thoughts, that rationalization each disgusting step of your journey that killed your marriage. Only then will it accomplish your claimed intentions. You should truly want it to be a penitence, which is the least you can do for your dead husband, and actual face the ugly truth of all your actions as to the how and the why, becomes you put all the dots down, or at least enough, you just fail to connect the dots, showing the actual manner in which you engage without a single thought towards your husband or guilt leaves you incapable of a mea culpa. Now this sounds bad. Maybe if you had the proper framing to force you on the right track, like rewrite this, try telling the tale through the eyes of your dead husband if he was alongside you, the action he saw. What did he feel when he saw you doing these things over another man? Or at least write the story how you were played by a player. You can't even start to omit that as you still to continue pine over the affair. It could actually help some people. You're already painted in the worst possible light. And you're not saving your husband from anything, as you put him in a far worse heck long before he sent himself there. The poor guy was imagining far worse things in his mind in his despair all alone, while you played on with your new love with him, fully aware of all it. A heck you created for him so bad that a person would risk forever damnation. He would consider it a lesser heck. Again, you could have ended it all, save your husband life, mostly likely saved your marriage, with a single phone call to your husband, and you were going to do it. Then with a few words from the player, oh, don't ruin your marriage, and you wanted to continue the play in the player's game. Your husband, who was without a doubt onto you by the time, was praying for that call that never came. Could you imagine what joy that would have brought your husband? How did the words from your so-called friend work for you? Is this really the words of advisement that a real friend would tell you, or more of a well-known and proven fact to destroy a marriage? It was just all accidental? An alignment of cosmic events manipulating fate? I bet even you would have never given that advice to a friend, would you? In truth, it's nothing more than a common tactic used by players to keep the action alive when at risk, but you're still trying to sell in forward. In summary, it's more of the later question, a great mystery that no psychologist can explain, when the story you told gives enough details to paint the picture. Yet, you stick to it's all just a great friendship gone wrong, and in hindsight you don't really see that the friendship is wrong, but truly it was never a friendship, just two players playing. You're not alone. Cheaters usually tell such a story in a similar way, leaving themselves stuck in a loop, doomed to repeat. Please prove me wrong on one point. Repost a true confession, so you can begin to really move on. Comment 4. IVA Network comments are total BS, unless this is new polite way to describe narcissist behavior. IVA Network sounds more like a 2x cheater. Your comments, those articles totally not support by any science. The psychologists are full of BS, just providing half-truths and phony rationalizations to make the guilty feel better. That is what the clients are paying them for, and when applied in reality their solutions never work, especially after 2 to 3 years. It's quite insulting to those who don't cheat. It almost reeks of painting non-cheaters as too quaint or not enlightened enough to stick it in anything that looks wet or can't spread it quick enough for a quick pounding. What you're describing is nothing more than a con, except they're conning themselves. By rational choice, they're just rationalizing an excuse as how no one will ever find out. A little fun won't hurt anyone. I deserve this, and the list goes on forever. William didn't take the quick way out, he took the only way out for him. He found out everything in his reality was a lie, and for a person who believed he had a loving wife who crushed everything he believed because she won a little strange tea, she was like a dog in heat starting when she got the email from the coach. The coach used a common ploy to see if spouse wants to play. While he knew it on a subconscious level, when he saw the actual betrayal in his wife's eyes, see the most important thing in his life was a lie, it caused him to have a psychotic break in which taking his life was one natural step away. The stress from such a loss can be so strong it can actually stop the heart. You should look it up, it's called broken heart syndrome. On business trips you would find two types, ones who stayed in at the hotel even continue to work so they might get back to their family sooner, and those who chose your alternate reality path acting like they just rolled to Las Vegas to cut loose and have the time of your life. This isn't an animal instinct, it's a MSC choice. Furthermore, people believe they deserve it and it doesn't sound. Vegas even has a slogan for it. The worst part is the end of affair rationalization. After the death of husband she stopped it with AP and didn't pursue him. It's better or noble. That makes it about 10 times worse, as she destroyed her marriage over absolute nothing. If it was for love and to be with Paul, at least it would have some kind meaning or worth something. She just made the whole thing senseless. Believe it or not, work colleagues can have camaraderie without having affairs. Some of us prefer to keep it professional, where some use it as their opportunity for their own Vegas. These people actually destroy camaraderie in the workplace. In fact, a lot of times the non-cheaters have to work harder, as cheaters tend to spend half their energy on their next possible flirt or encounter with their AP. I know over 30 years of work, I had over 100 invitations to start emotion affairs, never took the bait, around 6 or 7 straight up offers. If I got an email from a colleague drawing me into their personal world, my response would be, "Sorry, I'm really slammed this week, can you get somebody else to proof your email?" The AP didn't give a shit about her proofing the email, he was fishing for action. And she jumped in like a WH in heat. Now I do know serial adulterers/players as part of their game plan/con sell an alternative reality to their mark, and it does work. However, the cheating spouse must still make an active conscious choice to buy the rationalization and also play the game. So, I call total BS on the psychobabble. Cheating, it's a rational choice. Comment 5. Overcrowding exists in jails, so I guess it's possible they held an attempted suicide on the same wing as an arsonist who was likely doing time for felony manslaughter. True or not, your story of infidelity has a sadder ending than most, I'll give you that. All the other details of the what, when, how and why of your infidelity story are exactly the same as 1,000 others. The perfect husband, yet somehow that doesn't matter. Starts at work, somehow AP makes you feel special even though he's inferior to your spouse in every way. You know what you're doing is wrong, but you keep going. It's not long before you're spending way too much time with this person, staying after work, texting when you're at home. You know it's wrong, but you cross the line with a kiss. Tortured by guilt, yet you don't stop, even though at this point you might be able to save your marriage. You don't stop, because it feels so good, feels so different than your perfect spouse. The story is the same as thousands of others. I'd bet $100 you already knew you were going to cheat as soon as you decided to show him a bit of your panties that day at school. You said you knew your marriage was over as soon as you cheated, but I bet the letter you wrote likely asked for forgiveness and maybe even a second chance. You told your so how it was a mistake, how it didn't mean anything, how sorry you were. Except your husband already knew about your affair, and confronted you with texts and messages. I'll bet your husband had known for months. I'll bet he knew within a month of you starting the affair. Perhaps the first month he tried to deny what his gut already knew. He tried to tell himself his wonderful, loving wife would never cheat on him. He loved you so much, he just couldn't imagine you would do this to him. After 6 weeks or so he could no longer deny what his breaking heart was telling him. Yet it went on for months and every day his heart broke all over again. Maybe this was when he looked at your phone or laptop and his world collapsed around him. I wonder if your husband had already decided what he was going to do before he confronted you with the evidence of your affair. Except for the ending, it's just like so many other stories in these subs. Evil comes from a failure to think. It defies thought, for as soon as thought tries to engage itself with evil and examine the premises and principles from which it originates, it is frustrated because it finds nothing there. That is the banality of evil.